Hello everybody and thanks for joining me. Today I'm tying a little Caddis Pupa pattern with a sparkly polypropylene yarn back. The hook is a partridge size 10 grub hook. This pattern will work from 8 down to 16 or so, and my thread is UTC 70 in black. Now the polypropylene yarn I'll be using comes off the card quite thick, and I'll be using a third to a half of the bulk from that strand. You can see it's got a nice little bit of texture to it and it really catches the light. The rib is a green dyed turkey biot, and that's going to be wrapped over some light olive hare's dubbing, and this has been augmented with a little bit of sparkly antron. Makes for a very nice effect. The legs on this pattern are going to be from a nicely speckled patterned partridge feather, and finally up at the head end, a natural grey ostrich plume to make a fuzzy head that'll go nice and slick in the water. Here I'm going to tie in my fibres, my polypropylene yarn fibres. I'm drawing those through to length. You can see I'm really not using a huge bulk here. I want it to give more the effect of a little shuck that's starting to come off and the gas is trapped inside. As this Caddis Pupa makes its perilous ascent through the water, dodging those hungry trout trying to get to the surface, almost helpless, drifting with the current. Oh, it would be a snack for any fish. I'm tying in my rib here. I've pre-soaked that biot in a little bit of water to give it some flexibility. It is quite fragile otherwise. And now it's time to dub. These pupa have got a fairly chunky, plump little body, so I'm tying in a nice, reasonably long sausage of dubbing, just trying to keep it even. I'll add in a little bit more in the middle, just try and get it nice and even, with a small taper down at the tail, gradually building up towards the head of the fly. Just filling in any gaps there. This dubs on really nicely, and like I said, it's got that bit of sparkly yarn in it. It creates a very nice effect. Wrapping upside down to avoid the hook point, and I'm just going to build up that body, stopping about where we tied in our thread. You can see there's a little bit of that prickliness from the hare's ear, a bit of shimmer from the sparkly antron. It's a wonderful dubbing, and I use it a lot. We've secured down the ends of our yarn, and now it's time to wrap our biot. I prefer to do this by hand. I think that using hackle pliers you just get that little bit less feel, and it's easy to put too much tension on and snap it. I'm wrapping in fairly consistent open turns. This biot quite rapidly gets thicker, so even though the width of the turns is the same, the proportion covered is greater, and this creates a very nice progressive segmented effect for the body. It's really, really effective, and especially in the water that dubbing goes almost translucent. It looks amazing. A couple of tight turns to secure, and then supporting the hook with my bobbin holder, we can simply break off the excess. You'll see how fragile it is there. Now it's time to bring over our yarn, and this represents the split shuck of a caddis. As they emerge, or well, as they ascend to the surface, their larval skin starts to split open, and there's little gas bubbles trapped inside. And when you land this fly in the water, little pockets of air are going to get caught in and around that yarn. I've tied it down, folded it double, and we're just going to give the impression of a little bit of a wing coming off, tying that, cutting to about half the length of the body, and snipping away. You'll see that that's going to fan out, trap even more bubbles, gives a really nice effect. To blend that transition, I'm using a tiny extra pinch of my hare's dubbing, just blending over that step, and bringing it up towards the thorax. The next material to tie in is the legs, and I've prepared my partridge feather by snipping out a bit of that central stem, stripping off any fuzzies from the bottom, and we're going to use the natural curve of the feather to position the legs to our liking. This is much easier to do with the hook upside down, one of the many reasons I love having a rotary vise. I'm going to pinch that down, both sides of the hook, make a couple of loose turns over the top, position the stem centrally, and then gently grasping with my hackle pliers, I'm going to draw it through until that last bit of stem that we cut just before we took out the central section, until that's just covered by the thread wraps, and that's going to position these legs in a really nice V-shaped spread along the bottom of the fly. I'm happy with the position, so a few more tight wraps to secure, then come in with the scissors and trim away. Running the thread back down to the end of the thorax now, we can position our hook horizontal in the hook shank, add in a little touch of wax, and now the final material is going to be our head, made up of ostrich herl. You might have seen this in my last caddis pattern, but it looks very big and fluffy and bulky in the dry, but when it gets wet it absorbs loads of water and takes on a very supple, mobile, wet-looking, almost oily, greasy appearance. It's a fantastic material to tie, and I like to use it for heads on caddis flies and bodies on nymphs and incorporate it into lots of patterns. I've got it positioned with the natural V shape of those fibres pointing towards the tail of the fly, and I'm just wrapping in touching turns, working forwards towards the eye of the hook. Passing it hand over hand. This is quite a bit tougher than peacock herl, but it is still a fairly fragile material, so don't go mad with the tension. But just wrapping nice even turns, make a few wraps over to secure, double it back, and then we can build up a little bit of a head and whip finish. This is a pattern to fish dead drifted really. The Caddis Pupa don't have much by way of mobility or locomotion as they make their way up. They just drift and bounce with the current, and they're easy pickings for the fish. Here's a look at the finished fly. Got that nice segmented body showing through from underneath. That polypropylene bridge to catch those air bubbles and sparkle and glimmer on top. The suggestion of a wing, some dangly legs. And here I'll show you what happens with that head when it gets wet. Look at that slickness. Absolutely beautiful pattern. Do give this one a go. It's a fun one to tie and a fun one to fish. Catch you next time.